So the story begins in the scorching earth and hot winds in the ancient lands of Iraq, where humans buried spirits centuries ago. Buried beneath dust, stone, and time, lay a terrifying reality that no one wanted to disturb. But Father Merrin, a priest who sought the truth about spirits, not in books but in the ground, uncovers a strange statue. While digging, he discovers a strange figure. It was that of Majus. This was no ordinary devil. He was considered the god of hot winds, locusts, and drought. Father Marin understood that this discovery was no coincidence. It was a warning of the return of a demon. The scene then cuts to America, where a famous actress, Chris McMee, is living alone with her daughter Regan. Regan was only 12 years old innocent, but gradually some strange changes begin to occur in her. Strange noises in the house, rattling noises from the ceiling, and Regan's habit of sleepwalking all hinted at something sinister. One day, Chris found a Ouija board in Regan's room, which she had been playing with. She claimed she was talking to someone named Captain Howdy. Chris laughed it off, but what she thought was a joke was actually her daughter's soul. At night, Regan would tremble in her bed, her voice would change, her bed would shake, as if an invisible force was gripping her. Doctors were at a loss for answers. All tests came back normal. A mother's grief reached its peak when her innocent daughter began vomiting on the stairs. She vomited blood and terrified others with her actions. The story now introduces Father Daniel Karras, a priest struggling with his faith and life. His mother recently died, and he blames himself. At this time, when Chris asks for help, he initially refuses. But when he sees Ringan's condition, the terrifying voices within her, the supernatural forces, and the messages forming on her body, Father Karras realizes that this isn't just a medical case. This is the reality of the devil. Now, with the permission of the church, Father Merrin, the same man who faced Pedjus in Iraq, is called in two priests, an old man who has battled the devil before, and a young man who can't even defeat himself, meet in the house where Ringan is no longer the child she once was. She has now become a battlefield. This story now unfolds, one of sacrifice, faith, and a darkness that no one can see, only feel. Part 1 ends here. The next part will be even more terrifying, a true story of exorcism, where the life of an innocent child is at stake between hell and earth. The story had reached a point where fear began to suffocate humanity. Father Merrin and Father Damien were now in the room where Regan had been completely possessed by the devil. The air in the room felt heavy, as if time had stopped. Regan's eyes no longer seemed hers. The voices were someone else's. She was speaking, but her mouth wasn't moving. It was as if someone was speaking from within her. Father Merrin began to pray, and Father Damien followed suit. With each sentence, the walls of the room began to shake. Regan was laughing, screaming, and crying out loud. Her body was rising from the bed into the air. Even the bandages around her wrists were now soaked with blood. She spoke sometimes in Latin, sometimes in French, sometimes in a language that seemed out of this world. Father Merrin was calm. His eyes were filled with confidence. He knew it wasn't the devil. Many spirits had taken up residence inside Ringan simultaneously, but the most powerful among them was Bajus, the same ancient demon he had encountered during his excavations in Iraq. Ringan suddenly spoke in the voice of Father Damien's mother. "Damien, you left me to die. You are a bad son. You are a sinner." Father Damien's face fell. His eyes moistened. He closed his eyes, but Bajus had sensed her pain. He was now attacking her emotions. Father Merrin scolded Damien, saying, "Focus, father, it is not your fault. It is her trick. Keep your mind clear." But it wasn't easy. Just then, a strange smell emanated from Ringan's body. The room temperature became ice cold. The windows began to open automatically, and a terrible scream echoed in the air. Father Merrin was now reciting mantras rapidly. Suddenly, Ringan's eyes went white. Her head turned 180 degrees. She fell to the ground. She started to struggle. Damien rushed to her, but then Regan threw her into the air with one hand. The room was in a commotion. Then, after a few moments, there was silence. Father Merrin was exhausted. He sat down beside Regan. He placed his hand on her forehead and said, "Lord, let this child be free." But as soon as he finished praying, his breath stopped. Father Merrin was dead. As Damien saw this, something inside him snapped. He grabbed Regan tightly and screamed, "Come into me, take me immediately." And it was as if the devil had listened. In an instant, Regan calmed down, and Damien's eyes changed. The devil had now taken over. Damien tried to control himself and ran to the window. He jumped from the window. He tumbled down the stairs, his body broken. But Regan was free. Chris was leaving the house with Rajan. She had said goodbye to the house where she had seen her daughter writhing in pain. Rajan looked happy now, but she remembered nothing. The shadow of the devil had left her body. Had his soul even been released? This question gnawed at Krish. As Krish and Rajan were getting into the car, Father Joseph Dyer arrived. Krish returned Damien's locket, which Regan had last held. Dyer silently took the locket in his hand and looked up at the sky, as if trying to say something to God. Perhaps a thank you, perhaps a question. The house was now empty, but the screams still lingered within its walls, sometimes a child's, sometimes a demon's, sometimes a mother's. The city streets were quiet now, but the rooftop of that one house still seemed to hear who knows what. Meanwhile, at the church, a report on the entire case was being prepared. Exorcism had once again become the focus of the church's attention. The church had decided to study the subject even more deeply, because what had happened wasn't just a possession, it was a warning. Remembering Damien's sacrifice, Dyer sits in the corner of the church where Father Merrin often prayed. A candle is lit there, and Dyer says just one word, "Forgive us." A few weeks later, Chris and Regan have settled into a new city. Regan has started attending a new school, but sometimes she'll mumble something in her sleep. Chris gets scared, but then she'll pull herself together. One night, Regan suddenly asks Chris, "Mom, who was that man in black robe?" "He used to visit me in my dreams," he was saying. Chris's heart fluttered. She knew Regan didn't remember anything, but somewhere that feeling lingered. She smiled and said, "He was an angel's sweetheart." That night, Chris slept peacefully for the first time. The film ends there. But the story of the Exorcist was just the beginning, because evil is always lurking somewhere.